Welcome to this channel of real-life inspired, quiet relationship stories. My name is Naomi and there are second stories. What I'm about to share is a machiya fragment I've never told anyone. Tonight, let me tell you one more story I remembered, quietly, in the dark. The second day arrived with the kind of clarity that follows rain. Everything in Kyoto washed clean and gleaming like a city emerging from a dream. I had barely slept, my mind cycling through fragments of conversation, and the memory of Midori's voice saying my name like a question she already knew the answer to. At Kiyomizu Temple, where we had agreed to meet, I found her waiting among the wooden pillars that supported the famous stage overlooking the city. She wore a different kimono today, this one the color of autumn leaves, and she moved through the morning crowd like water, finding its way around stones, noticed but not disturbed, admired but not approached. "Naomi," she said when she saw me, and again. My name sounded different in her mouth, like something being translated into a language I was just beginning to understand. We stood together on the wooden platform, looking out over the ancient capital, spread below us like a story written in temple roofs and garden walls, and I felt the strange vertigo of standing at the edge of something I couldn't yet see the bottom of. She led me through Kyoto like a curator of hidden things, down narrow alleys, where traditional houses leaned against each other like old friends, sharing secrets, past gardens where every stone had been placed with intention, and every tree pruned with the patience of generations. We visited workshops where artisans bent over looms, and potters' wheels, their hands, creating beauty with the unconscious grace of people who had found their purpose. In the Gion district, where geishas still moved, like living artwork through streets that remembered the Edo period, Midori showed me the textile shop where she worked. It was a narrow building squeezed between a tea house and a traditional sweet shop, its interior filled with bolts of silk that caught the light like captured rainbows. Her colleagues, elderly women with fingers stained by decades of dye work, greeted her with the warmth reserved for family. "This is my other life," she said, running her hands over a bolt of midnight blue silk shot through with silver threads. "The one where I still believe in beautiful things." I watched her work, saw how she touched each piece of fabric, as if it contained stories she was helping to preserve, and I understood that her relationship with beauty was both her anchor and her burden. We spent the afternoon in traditional tea houses where the ceremonies felt like meditation, where each gesture carried the weight of centuries, and every cup of tea was an invitation to slow down, to pay attention, to remember that some things were more important than efficiency. Between the formal rituals, we talked in the way that people do when they sense they have limited time, urgently, but carefully, sharing the important things while leaving the dangerous ones unspoken. As evening approached, she suggested dinner at a kaiseki restaurant, hidden in the basement of a building that looked abandoned from the outside. The meal was a work of art served on dishes that were themselves masterpieces, each course arriving like a small poem about the season, the weather, the relationship between hunger and satisfaction. Over delicate arrangements of mountain vegetables and perfectly grilled fish, We finally began to speak more directly about the lives we had built, and the ones we had abandoned. Midori's marriage, she told me, had been arranged by families who understood tradition better than they understood people. Her husband was a good man in the way that well-made furniture is good, functional, reliable, completely lacking in surprise. I tried to love him, she said, her voice so quiet. I had to lean forward to hear her over the whisper of other conversations around us. But love, I think, requires a kind of wildness that I was taught to suppress. By the time I realized what was missing, we had become strangers who shared a house and nothing else. I told her about my own careful life, about the publishing house, where I helped other people find their voices while forgetting I had one, about the apartment in Tokyo, where I lived surrounded by books, and the growing certainty that I was disappearing even from my own story. We were two people, I realized, who had become experts at living lives that looked right from the outside while feeling empty from within. After dinner, we walked through the Gion district. As it transformed into its evening self, lanterns cast warm pools of light on stone paths, and the occasional glimpse of a geisha, or Maiko hurrying to an appointment, reminded us that some forms of beauty still moved through the world with purpose and grace. Midori's house, when we reached it, was a traditional machiya, tucked into a narrow alley behind the main street. From the outside, it looked like something from a historical drama: wooden lattice screens, a heavy tile roof, a small garden visible through a gap in the fence. Inside, it was a perfect marriage of old and new, tatami mats and modern lighting, traditional furniture and contemporary art. Tea? She asked, and I nodded, though we both understood that tea was not really what we were negotiating. We knelt on cushions around a low table while she performed the ceremony with the same careful attention I had watched her give to the silk in her shop. The ritual gave us something to do with our hands, while we figured out what to do with our hearts. The conversation that followed was unlike any I had ever had, not because of what we said, but because of what we didn't say. We spoke around the edges of attraction, like people walking around a deep well, acknowledging its presence without looking directly into its depths. We talked about loneliness and the strange way that recognizing it in someone else could make it both more and less bearable. Sometimes, Midori said, setting down her teacup, with the precision of someone performing a sacred act, I think I have been waiting my entire life for someone to see me clearly, not the role I play or the function I serve, but the person I actually am underneath all the careful training in how to be appropriate. I understood what she meant because I had been waiting for the same thing, to be seen, not as an editor or a colleague or a useful person, but as myself, whatever that might turn out to be. In the soft light of her traditional room, with the sounds of ancient Kyoto settling into sleep around us, I felt something I had not felt in years: the possibility of being known. What happened next exists in the space between what can be spoken and what must remain in silence. There was recognition, and there was tenderness, and there was the kind of careful attention that people pay to rare and fragile things. We moved toward each other with the gravity of people who understand that some moments cannot be repeated, who know that life offers very few opportunities to step outside the careful boundaries we have constructed and into the wild territory of genuine connection. In the morning, I woke in her spare room to the sound of temple bells and the rustle of silk as she prepared for work. We had tea together in comfortable silence, two people who had shared something important without quite naming what it was. She left for her textile shop with a bow that contained multitudes, and I returned to my conference, with the feeling that everything familiar had become slightly strange. But this story, I know now, was only beginning. What started as a chance meeting in a tea house would grow into something larger, and more complicated than either of us could have imagined. A connection that would transform us both and cost us more than we were prepared to pay. Sometimes, in quiet moments, I still remember the weight of that first evening in her traditional house, the way the shadows fell across tatami mats, and the careful way we moved around the possibility of touching. It was the last time anything between us would be simple. The last moment when we could still pretend that some connections can be contained within the boundaries of a single evening, a single week, a single carefully ordered life. But I am getting ahead of myself. Tonight, I will stop here, with the memory of temple bells and the taste of green tea, and the knowledge that sometimes, if we are very fortunate and very foolish, we meet someone who shows us who we really are underneath all our careful disguises. Whether it truly happened, or maybe it didn't, somehow, the telling makes that less important. If even a small part of this story stays with you, then I'm glad I chose to share it. If you feel like it, I'd be happy to have you back for another story, and if you enjoyed this quiet moment, please consider subscribing. Until next time, another quiet night.